You should feel honored, Rebecca said, swirling her champagne in the crystal glass our grandmother had left us. Not everyone gets to be maid of honor at the society wedding of the year. My name is Charlotte Warren, and I was watching my childhood best friend celebrate stealing my future with our grandmother's favorite champagne and our grandmother's favorite glass. The same grandmother who had trusted us to share her estate equally, believing until her last breath that her two beloved granddaughters would honor her wishes. Nothing to say, Charlie? Rebecca prompted, using the nickname she knew I hated. No tears about the money. No lecture about family loyalty. I kept my expression neutral as I studied her. The designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, the enormous diamond ring her fiancé Thomas had surprised her with, the wedding planning binders spread across what used to be our grandmother's antique desk. Congratulations, I said simply. The wedding sounds perfect. She frowned slightly, thrown off by my calm demeanor. That's it? No drama? No threats to tell Thomas where the money really came from? Would it change anything? No, she laughed, taking another sip of champagne. The money's spent, Charlie. The venues are booked. The deposits are paid. And in 6 weeks, I'm marrying into one of Boston's oldest families. Everything I've always dreamed of. What she meant was everything she'd stolen from both of us. Our grandmother's estate was supposed to be split equally, enough for each of us to start our own lives, pursue our dreams. Instead, Rebecca had spent the past year systematically draining every account she could access, using her power of attorney and her knowledge of banking to move money around until there was nothing left. Well, I said, picking up my purse, I'm sure it will be beautiful. Don't be like that, she called as I turned to leave. We had fun spending it, didn't we? All those shopping trips, the spa days. I let you enjoy some of it before it was gone. I paused at the door, thinking of all the times we'd played in this house as children, all the summers spent listening to our grandmother's stories, all the promises we'd made to each other. You're right, Rebecca. I did enjoy it. More than you know. As I walked out of our grandmother's house, Rebecca's house now, thanks to some creative manipulation of the will, I could hear her already on the phone, probably calling her wedding planner about some extravagant new detail she'd thought of. What she didn't know was that I'd discovered her deception 3 months ago, right after she'd started moving the larger sums. She thought she was being clever, using her banking background to hide the transfers, but she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I worked in digital forensics. The drive home was quiet. Through the car windows, I could see Boston's familiar skyline, the same view I'd grown up with. The same view our grandmother had loved right up until the end. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya, my colleague and one of the few people who knew what I'd been planning. Is it done? Phase 1 complete, I replied. She doesn't suspect a thing. Maya was one of 3 people who knew what I'd been quietly preparing since I first discovered Rebecca's betrayal. Like me, she'd seen through the perfect facade. The extravagant spending, the whirlwind romance with Thomas, the carefully constructed image of the society bride-to-be. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I passed Mrs. Chen from next door, who gave me a sympathetic smile. She'd been friends with our grandmother, had watched Rebecca and me grow up. She knew what was happening. I'd probably seen through Rebecca's act from the beginning. Such a shame, she'd said to me last week. Your grandmother would be heartbroken. But that was where Mrs. Chen was wrong. Our grandmother hadn't been naive, she'd been strategic. What Rebecca never understood was that the estate she thought she'd cleverly stolen was only part of the picture. I entered my apartment and went straight to my home office, where Maya was waiting with our other conspirators, James from cybersecurity and Lisa, our grandmother's former secretary. Everything's in place, Maya said as I walked in. We're just waiting for your signal. I nodded, setting my bag down and looking at the wall of monitors they'd set up. Each screen showed different aspects of our plan: bank records, property deeds, social media feeds, and most importantly, the evidence we gathered of Rebecca's systematic theft. How long until she notices? Lisa asked, her legal pad already covered in notes. She won't, I replied. Not until the wedding day. That's what she cares about most, her perfect society wedding. I thought back to how this all started. Rebecca and I had grown up together, raised by our grandmother after our parents died in a car accident. We were more than cousins. We were sisters, best friends. At least, that's what I believed. But Rebecca had always wanted more. While I was content with our comfortable life, She dreamed of joining Boston's elite. When she met Thomas Bradford at a charity gala last year, she saw her chance. He came from old money, the kind of family she'd always envied. The first warning sign came when she started changing. Subtle things at first, like canceling our weekly dinners, becoming obsessed with social media and her public image. Then came the spending, designer clothes, luxury cars, lavish parties to impress Thomas's family. I trusted her when she said she was just enjoying our inheritance, celebrating our grandmother's memory. That was my first mistake. Show me the timeline, I said to Maya. She pulled up a detailed flowchart on the main screen. Phase 1 is complete. She believes you've accepted everything. Phase 2 starts next week, when the wedding vendors begin receiving their payment confirmations. James nodded. All the fake transactions are in place. As far as any of them know, they've been paid in full. And Thomas? I asked. Still completely in the dark about where the money really came from, Lisa confirmed. He thinks Rebecca's family was just, well off. I smiled slightly. Rebecca had played her part perfectly, crafting an image of old money and refined taste. She'd even started speaking differently, adopting the subtle mannerisms of Boston's upper class. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. Don't forget, final dress fitting next week. Try not to look too devastated about the money. We wouldn't want to ruin the photos. I showed the message to my team. She really thinks she's won. Are you sure about the timing? Maya asked. We could expose her sooner, stop the wedding before. No, I cut her off. She wants her perfect day. Let her have it, right up until the moment it falls apart. I turned back to the monitors, watching as our plan continued to unfold. Rebecca thought she'd inherited a substantial estate and spent it all on her dream wedding. What she actually gotten was access to the smaller trusts, the one our grandmother had set up knowing it might be misused. The real estate, the investment accounts, the family business, all of that had been quietly transferred into a separate trust years ago. A trust that would only activate under specific conditions. Start the sequence, I told James. Make sure everything looks perfect right up until the wedding day. He nodded, fingers flying over his keyboard. The vendors are already set up. They all think they've been paid, but the actual transactions will bounce, I finished. Every single one of them, right in the middle of her perfect ceremony. The next few hours were spent finalizing details. Lisa reviewed the legal documentation one more time, ensuring everything was airtight. Maya coordinated with our contacts in the banking industry, making sure the transaction failures would be properly documented. And James worked his magic with the digital trails. Around sunset, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Rebecca. The flowers arrived for tomorrow's bridal shower. You really should see them, Charlie. This is what real money can buy. I showed the message to the others. She really has no idea what's coming, does she? Lisa said, shaking her head. Rebecca always did confuse wealth with worth. I replied, tomorrow she starts learning the difference. The morning of Rebecca's wedding dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for what Boston's social pages were calling the event of the season. I stood in front of the mirror in the bridal suite of the Fairmont Copley Plaza, adjusting my maid of honor dress while Rebecca fussed with her custom Vera Wang gown. Everything has to be perfect, she said for the 100th time, scrutinizing her reflection. Thomas's family expects nothing less. I smiled, checking my phone discreetly. A message from Maya flashed across the screen. All systems ready. Vendor payments failing in sequence. Don't worry, I told Rebecca, tucking my phone away. Everything will be exactly as it should be. The bridal suite was a flurry of activity. Hairstylists, makeup artists, photographers, all carefully selected to create Rebecca's fantasy wedding. Each one had received confirmation of payment, not knowing that those confirmations were as hollow as the bride's promises. I still can't believe it's finally happening, Rebecca gushed, accepting a glass of champagne from one of her bridesmaids. All those years of dreaming, and now I'm marrying into the Bradford family. Grandmother would have been so proud. I bit back a response, thinking of the real pride our grandmother had taken, not in social status or wealth, but in honesty and integrity. Values Rebecca had conveniently forgotten. My phone buzzed again. James this time. First vendor payment bounced. Florist trying to reach Rebecca. Right on schedule. Oh God, one of the bridesmaids suddenly exclaimed, looking at her phone. Rebecca, the florist is saying there's a problem with their payment. Rebecca's face tightened slightly, but she maintained her composed smile. It's just a mix-up. Charlie, be a dear and handle it. Of course, I said smoothly, stepping out of the suite. In the hallway, I watched the notifications start rolling in on my phone. One by one, vendor payments were being rejected. The caterer, the band, the photographer, even the hotel itself. I dialed Maya. How's it looking? Beautiful chaos, she replied. The florist is threatening to remove the arrangements, the caterer is demanding immediate payment, and the hotel manager is heading up to speak with Rebecca right now. As if on cue, I saw the manager striding down the hallway, his face set in a professional mask of concern. I stepped aside as he knocked on the bridal suite door. Miss Warren, he called. We need to discuss an urgent matter regarding payment. The door flew open, revealing Rebecca in her wedding gown, her carefully applied makeup already showing signs of stress. What do you mean, payment? Everything was handled weeks ago. I'm afraid there seems to be a problem with all the vendor payments, the manager explained. The transactions have been rejected by your bank. Rebecca's face went pale. That's impossible. I have the confirmation emails. Yes, well, the manager cleared his throat. It appears those confirmations were premature. We'll need immediate payment to proceed with the wedding. I watched as Rebecca's perfect facade began to crack. She fumbled for her phone, probably trying to access the accounts she thought were still full of our grandmother's money. This is insane, she muttered, her fingers shaking as she typed. The money was there. I checked yesterday. Problems? I asked innocently. She grabbed my arm, pulling me back into the suite. Charlie, I need you to help me fix this. There must be some mistake. Like the mistake you made when you stole my inheritance? I asked quietly. She froze, really looking at me for the first time that day. What did you do? Me? Nothing. I just made sure everyone knew exactly where their money wasn't coming from. The color drained from her face as understanding dawned. You knew? All this time? I knew everything, Rebecca. The fake transfers, the emptied accounts, even the lies you told Thomas about your family's wealth. As if summoned by his name, there was another knock at the door. Thomas's mother stood there, her face tight with barely contained fury. Rebecca, she said coldly, we need to talk. Now. The next hour was like watching a carefully constructed house of cards collapse in slow motion. The vendors began removing their unpaid services, flowers disappeared from the reception hall, catering staff packed up their equipment, the band started loading out their instruments. Thomas's family, already skeptical of their son's whirlwind romance, demanded answers about Rebecca's supposedly wealthy background. The truth about her systematic theft of our grandmother's estate came out in a rush of accusations and tears. You lied to me, Thomas demanded, his face a mask of betrayal. About everything. I did it for us, Rebecca pleaded. For our future. Our future, he laughed bitterly. There is no future. The wedding's off. As the Bradford family swept out of the hotel, taking their son and their social connections with them, Rebecca turned on me, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. How could you do this to me? She demanded. I'm your family. Family? I repeated. Family doesn't steal from each other, Rebecca. Family honors their promises. I was going to pay you back, she insisted, once I married Thomas. No, I cut her off. You were going to keep taking, just like you always have. But not anymore. I pulled out an envelope, the real reason I'd let this charade continue so long. Grandmother left more than just the money you stole, I explained, watching her face as understanding dawned. She left instructions, conditions for the real inheritance. Real inheritance? Rebecca whispered. The family business, the properties, the investment accounts all held in a separate trust. A trust that would only activate if one of us proved worthy of it. And you think you're worthy? She spat. No, I said quietly. I think neither of us was until today. Grandmother knew one of us might be tempted to take advantage of the other. This was her test, to see who would choose integrity over greed. The implications of what she'd done, not just to me, but to her own future, finally seemed to hit Rebecca. She sank into a chair, her perfect wedding dress crumpling around her. What happens now? She asked, her voice small. Now? Now you start over. Without the stolen money, without the fake status, without the lies. Maybe then you'll remember what really matters. I left her there, surrounded by the ruins of her perfect day. Outside the hotel, Maya, James, and Lisa were waiting. Well? Maya asked. It's done, I replied. Everything exactly as grandmother planned. Lissa smiled sadly. She would be proud, not of the deception, but of the lesson. I nodded, thinking of all the summers spent listening to our grandmother's stories about integrity, about doing what's right even when it's hard. She had known this day might come, had prepared for it in her own way. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and media coverage. The story of the society wedding that wasn't made all the local papers. Rebecca's carefully constructed image crumbled as the truth about her theft came to light. She left Boston shortly after, unable to face the social humiliation. Last I heard, she was working at a bank in Seattle, starting over from scratch. The family business continued under my leadership, guided by the principles our grandmother had taught us. The real inheritance wasn't just the money or the properties, it was the understanding that true wealth comes from integrity, not deception. One afternoon, about a month after everything had settled, I sat in our grandmother's study, my study now, looking through old photo albums. Pictures of Rebecca and me as children, playing in this very room, unaware of the lessons life would teach us. Maya knocked on the door, carrying a familiar bottle of champagne. Found this in the cellar, she said. Thought maybe it was time for a proper celebration. I smiled, recognizing our grandmother's favorite vintage. Why not? But this time, let's celebrate something real. As we shared the champagne, I thought about Rebecca, about the choices that had led us here. Part of me wished things could have been different, that she could have learned these lessons without such public consequences. But as I sat in our grandmother's chair, surrounded by the legacy she truly left us, I knew that sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we need most. To grandmother, Maya proposed, raising her glass. No, I corrected her, to doing what's right, because in the end, that's the only inheritance that really matters.